your
It's a more
face.
expensive real life because they've jacked up the price. I just muted myself accidentally.
Was it accidentally or was it the universe? Hey there, adventurers. Welcome to Let's Just Go podcast. I'm Chris.
And I'm Kayla. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the differences between staying on site at a Disney resort, both at the Disneyland Resort and Walt Disney World, versus staying off site. They're a little bit different,
Definitely a little bit
but
different and pros and cons to both,
yeah, for sure.
right?
Yeah.
And so you can decide what makes the most sense for you. We're going to try not to compare the two because they are so very different. So we'll really start off with talking about Walt Disney World and the perks and comparing staying on site versus off site. And then we'll move into Disneyland because the one thing that quickly comes to mind for me is Disneyland just staying off site makes, in many cases, may make more sense for people than at Walt Disney World. One, simply because of the amount of options that they have that are still as close to the park as some of the on-site hotels, right? Where in Disney World, you have
Not
this,
that easy.
it's not that easy. You're staying off property. You don't necessarily feel like you're in the bubble, right? So there's a lot of differences, but we'll try to chime in. So
Yeah.
and I think one of the things that is changing, right, at least at the time of recording this, is some of the perks are coming back because in the post-COVID world,
There weren't any.
yeah, they kind of went away. And it was
Yeah.
like, well, outside of proximity and ease of getting to the parks by the Disney transportation, really wasn't too many other things. So they are slowly come back. And now I feel like we're almost back to there's definitely an advantage to staying on property at Walt Disney World. What's your favorite on site perk before we jump into all of them?
Okay. I wouldn't call it a perk necessarily, but being at one of the hotels that is a quick walk to a park, I would say for me, as someone coming from Disneyland, that's the biggest perk for me is not having to get in transportation to get to a park because I usually stay at the Epcot resort area. So I can walk to Epcot or I can walk to Hollywood Studios without
Right.
needing to get on any transportation.
I would agree. For me, that's the that's the number.
Convenience is the word I'm looking for here.
Most recent trip I stayed at Animal Kingdom Lodge, which as we've talked
Yes, you
about
did.
before, it is a deluxe resort. It is beautiful.
It
It
is.
is far from everything, right? And so finding myself on a long ass bus, I'm like, oh my God. But of course, your price point matches that, right?
Yeah.
In terms of where you stay. But I would agree. I am often at a deluxe resort at the Epcot resorts or on a monorail resort. So I'm at least
Hmm.
getting walkable or monorail access to two of the four parks, right? So it makes it much easier. So
Yeah.
outside of that, we can start by talking about that's probably one of the best perks of staying on site. And I already briefly mentioned the transportation, right? So even if you're at a value resort or even like the Animal Kingdom Lodge, you're going to get a bus, a boat, a monorail, or walking distance to
Or a Skyliner.
Skyliner being the gondola system, the newer gondola system. It's not that new anymore, but it's the newest form of
Hmm.
transportation um, to get to any of the theme parks, right? And
Hmm.
that is a huge advantage, especially even Magic Kingdom, because what people don't realize is like even the Swan and Dolphin, they're dropping you off at the Ticket and Transportation Center, and then you still have to get on a ferry boat or a monorail to get to the park. Whereas all the Disney resorts are going to drop you off at the front gate of Magic Kingdom, right? You're bypassing that entire lake, and you're going to get right there. Or obviously staying at Contemporary, and you can walk. You can also now walk
Hmm.
from Grand. It's a little bit more of a hike.
A little bit further, especially when it's 90 degrees
Yeah,
outside.
you don't necessarily want to do that, but it is a nice option should it be insane at the end of a night or something.
Something else to keep in mind, talking about Ticket and Transportation Center, if you take a Lyft or an Uber, they're also dropping you off
Mhm.
there. They
Yep.
cannot, the only way outside of a Disney bus or the monorail or a boat, the only outside option to get you to the front gate of Magic Kingdom to get dropped off is a minivan,
Mhm.
and you can only pick up a minivan on property. So you can't get a minivan from your hotel that's closer to Universal than it is to Disney. That's not an option for you. So if you're wanting to spend the $50 for a 10-minute ride on a minivan, more power to you, because again, convenience here is key, and you're going to get dropped off in the bus corral with all of the other Disney resorts, which is, I think, a perk of staying on site, because again, you don't have that luxury if you're not staying on site.
And maybe coming from like Animal Kingdom, paying the $50 might be worth it for many people,
Right.
right? To be
Yeah.
able to like be in charge of the time, not waiting for a bus, private transportation, drop off right at the front.
Chris
So
is talking about himself right now when he says
yeah, well, mostly I
he
think
is that bougie bitch.
I am. I mean, 9 times out of 10, I'm really just
Yeah.
thinking about myself.
Yeah.
If we're going to be honest here. So so I agree. That is a huge perk though, right? And the whole idea that you don't
Mhm.
really need to rent a car. One of the perks
Yeah.
that's gone and never really came back was the Magical Express, right? But that was coming, that
Mhm.
was leaving even before COVID. That was leaving. They had announced their separation from Mears and they weren't going to be including that as part of the package price. They still have an option though, so you don't have to deal with car seats and things. It's just you're paying for it and it's not through Disney. So, but once you're in the Disney bubble, you don't have to have a car. You don't have to worry about a thing, right? Um,
If you do have a car, though, it's free to park at the parks. So if you're staying at
yeah,
your hotel, you're not paying to park at your hotel. And
correct.
then on top of that, if you decide you want to drive to the parks, you do not have to pay for parking at the parks.
Right. So no parking fees when you're staying on site as an added bonus, or if so, if
Mm-hmm.
you've even driven, right? I mean, not everybody
Mm-hmm.
flies, so if you've driven to Walt Disney World, so hands down for me, transportation easy, right? And sometimes people are like, I want to stay at the Swan and Dolphin, which are walkable to Epcot and Hollywood
Hollywood
Studios.
Studios.
However, to getting to the other two parks is not nearly as convenient, right? And it also doesn't feel for me those location wise, those hotels are great, but they're off prop. They're technically on
That's,
property, but not
yep.
Disney. So it's like a weird caveat.
They're
Um,
good neighbor hotels. So
they're
when
good
we
name.
say on property versus off property,
Yeah,
what we really mean is, are they a Disney owned hotel, or are they a good neighbor hotel, which is essentially Disney has endorsed them and said, yes, we trust them. You can book there. You're going to get Disney level service or
right,
close to it.
right.
And we will partner with them, and you can have a vacation package.
Yep. And these are actually on Disney property proper, right? They're on the
Yeah.
actual property. So very close to the Boardwalk Beach and Yacht Club. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
familiar at all with the location, however, they do feel like a nice Marriott, right? They don't
Yeah.
feel like this Disney hotel. I don't feel like I've escaped. So that's a feeling that Disney has done a really good job at creating when you're staying at any Disney hotel, regardless
Mm-hmm.
of whether it's value moderate or deluxe. Some of the other benefits, though, I think, well, one that's coming in 2025 for packages, if you've booked a package, not just a room only, is that you actually get access for free to the water park, whichever water park is open on your first day of arrival, right? So
Yep.
that's a little added extra bonus of value. It's an interesting concept, but my guess is one, they're trying to drive people to the water park, but two, it's a nice way to get people out of the hotel saying, is my room ready? Is my room ready? Hi, I arrived. I arrived at 8:02 a.m. Is my room ready? Nah, nah,
Or
lady.
if you flew from the West Coast and you took a red eye and you
Yeah,
got there at 5
yeah. And
a.m.,
you're
which
like,
is definitely a thing I've done multiple occasions. Oh,
I need a room. I need a room. Well, if
yeah.
check-in is at 3 or
Yeah.
4 for villas, like you're
Yep.
like, well, yeah. So it's a nice way to get people, um, out of the hotel. But that is another added value that is no additional cost to you. It's included in your package price. So that's an additional perk coming in 2025. We don't know if that'll extend beyond 2025, but they've announced it for the calendar year of 2025 check-ins. Um, some of the other perks of staying on site, you can add the dining plan to your package,
Mhm.
right? That's the only way you're going to be able to get a dining plan. And people ask us all the time, is the dining plan worth it? Um, and 9 times out of 10, it is. It does depend on um, your eating style and your travel party, right? I mean, there's a million. We could do a whole episode on, is the
We
dining
should
plan
do a
worth
whole
it? We
episode on the
should.
dining
We
plan.
should. So we won't go into details of that, but
It's about convenience,
it's
again, at the end of the day.
yeah,
Do you want to feel like you have an all-inclusive trip, or would you rather pay as you go and potentially not eat as much
right.
and save maybe a couple dollars?
And
It's,
for
it really is a wash, I think.
yeah, but long ago they would tout that you save 20 to 25% on food. They
Yeah,
don't do that anymore, but I do love, for me, the way I approach finance, and I like the pre budget for it,
same.
pay for it up
Yep.
front, know exactly what I'm paying very little while I'm there versus, okay, I'm going to drop a grand a day on food, right? Like, we're going to
Hmm.
go out to dinner and it's $300, or is it going to be 500, depending on where we're like, all the things,
Yeah.
right? And you're like, well, now it's done. I know it's completed. So that's a nice advantage, and a great advantage when you're in a multi generational group or just in multiple
Hmm.
parties in general. Because then you're not like, well, who? I got a salad. I only want to pay $10. I got a steak. No, none of that. No, no,
Yeah.
no one has time for that. First of all, and so it's just a dining credit. You're burning a credit regardless of
Hmm.
what you're doing. So that's an additional perk. And then now with the lightning lanes, that is probably the single biggest perk to enhance your day, right? Your
Yeah.
in park day, um, is you can select your lightning lanes and your dining reservations and really any of your experiences. So you can book your dining reservations 60 days out for your whole length of stay, right? Versus if I was staying off property, I could book my dining 60 days out from my day one. And then the next morning, I have to do it 60 days out from my day two. And then the next morning, I have to do it, right? So I'm always at a disadvantage because everybody staying on property has already booked. And now, same thing for the lightning lanes. I can select my lightning lanes if I'm staying on property 7 days in advance versus off property 3 days, one at a time. 3 days out from my first day, 3 days out from my second day, next day, next day. Now I'm doing it 7 days out and for my full length of stay. So I think there's that's a huge advantage to, and because people obviously want to get very specific attractions, and
Hmm.
they've worked through most of the loopholes for people to not be able to be like, oh, I can just book a room only and then cancel it. And so in most cases, there's really no loophole around that. You have to have an on-site package or room booked. So um, a huge advantage to staying on property. Anything else I'm missing?
Yeah. What I would say are my second and slash or third most important, which is one, early entry into the parks, regardless of where you're staying. I love that your face just lit up like,
I
oh,
forgot
duh.
about that one.
So you're getting into the parks a half an hour early, every park, every day, regardless, as long as you are staying at a Disney property. And I think there's a handful. Am I wrong?
There are a few, like Swan and Dolphin, I
Swan
believe
and
is the
Dolphin, yeah.
only, and Swan Reserve, and maybe one
Reserve,
other
yeah.
hotel. Did you say
So there's that,
how long did you say?
a half an hour.
Yeah, half hour, every park, every day, doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Yep.
And then if you are staying in a deluxe resort, this is something that could end at any time, honestly. They have never announced that it is ending, but they also don't announce that it's coming until very close to your travel dates. Is if you are staying at a deluxe resort, different uh theme parks will have extended hours specifically for deluxe resort guests. So when I was most recently there, Epcot was doing them for the night that we were arriving. It was from, I believe, 9 to 11. So the park closed at 9. And then starting at 9 o'clock, only deluxe resort guests could scan into rides. So technically, there can be people who are not deluxe resort guests in the park still, but you have to scan to get into every single ride. And it makes the ride lines a lot shorter, which is nice.
Right. And generally it's 2 hours, and it usually happens 2 nights a week, right? And it's
Yeah.
just at one park. Um, for a while, it was just Epcot and Magic Kingdom, and now that the
Hmm.
parties, like the Halloween and Christmas parties, are coming, I think they are including Animal and Hollywood in that, just to kind of pivot away from Matt, since Magic is jammed up with the
Yeah.
parties. But Yeah, for sure. So that's a specific, you have to be staying in a deluxe resort, but everybody gets those early morning hours in the morning, which a half hour, you're like, really, a half hour? What the hell's that going to do? It honestly does a lot, right? Because
Hmm.
you could be through one and in a line for a second attraction before the gates open to the rest of the world, right? So, um, you know, I that's a huge perk. Now, the one thing that
Yeah.
we talked about, you and I talked about before this um, recording, is the one thing that's not back at either Disneyland or Disney World, and that is send my purchases back to my room. Right?
Hmm.
We want that back. Damn it, we are demanding
Yeah.
that return. That is such a nice.
Tell Disney we want it.
We want it back. Damn it.
Their rivals are doing it. Why can't they do it?
They're yeah, their rivals are doing it.
Hmm.
Maybe they need us to go down and do it. Maybe they just pay us well. We'll go down. I'll drive
As
around to the
as someone who worked in merchandising at Walt Disney World when this was a thing, I can tell you, you don't want that job. Like your
transporting.
job is literally driving around a cargo van all day
True.
from location to location to location to
You
location.
don't have to talk to anybody.
You have to talk to the other merchandising cast members who, I'm
True.
going to be honest with you, are kind of dumb sometimes and don't know what they're talking about. So,
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm
you
sure it
know.
did create more problems than it was probably worth. But it was a nice thing. As long as you had one day left of your trip, you could. You're buying something big in the parks. You don't want to be lugging it around for the next 8 hours.
Yeah, I don't want to carry my droid around all
Right.
day.
What that also then did
Yeah.
too, now that it doesn't exist, what that does too is at the end of the night, the stores are swamped because they're like, oh, well, we'll just get
Hmm.
it before we leave. Well, you and every other person in there is doing the exact same thing. Right.
Yeah.
It's the one and only reason I miss like pushing a stroller, because at least the stroller could have held the shit. Um,
I mean, the girls would probably get in a stroller if you really
they
asked
probably would.
nicely.
They probably would. Maybe I would get in it and they could push me. Um, so that's not back. But I guess we'll talk too about some of the perks of staying, which might lend easily bleed into the Disneyland portion. But the perks of staying at the Disney World Good Neighbors, right? And there are a
Mhm.
few perks, like we talked about. Some have the additional, but even the Four Seasons doesn't get the 7 day or the 60 day
Mhm.
length of stay of booking dining, right? So
But the flip side of that is it is the Four Seasons and like
yeah,
nothing on you and I've had this conversation before. There is nothing on Disney property. It does not matter how big of a Disney fanatic you are. The Four Seasons does not compare to the Grand Floridian.
no,
Like the Four Seasons is going to blow them out of the fucking water.
yeah.
So,
There is no 5-star Disney
yeah.
World proper resort. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
no. But you are losing some of those perks, which, right, the person's like, well, I'm paying all this money to stay at the Four Seasons. I want to have, Cinderella's Royal Table dining. And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
you might not get
Best of
it
luck.
actually, right? So there are some, things to think about that. But in most cases, it is more economical to stay off property,
Mhm.
right? And so, even when the other things that you do have to factor in, like the one thing that I always tell people though who are like, well, we want to stay off property. I'm like, the transportation options. Oh, this hotel has buses. I'm like, they suck, right? They're going to come. You might need to schedule them depending on the hotel you're staying at. They're going to come every 30 to 45 minutes versus every 15 to 20 at Disney as a Disney World hotel. You might actually be sharing it with another close by off property hotel, right? Like,
Mhm. They
uh,
might only be dropping you off at the ticket and transportation
right.
center,
They
and then you
probably
have to
are.
figure it out from
Yeah.
there.
And then, so
Yeah.
you might rent a car, which then sounds fine, but now you're spending money for a car and then you're going to pay daily for parking,
And
right?
it's like $25, I think, a vehicle to park at a Disney park. Does that sound right?
I think it's actually 30 now.
I was gonna say 30, and then I was like, "No, that's way too high. It
You know
can't be
why? Because
30."
when I was just at the Animal Kingdom, we rented a car. We had a rental car. And my bougie ass, I was like, I'm gonna drive and we're gonna pay for, actually this is an on-site perk that people don't really talk about. I pay for the preferred parking, right? Which gets
Of
you all the
course
way
you
up to the front, but
do.
it's half price. It used to be half price, but now it's actually
Oh.
preferred parking for off-site guests is $50. But if you're on
Oof.
site, if you're staying on site, it's only $20. So
Oh.
so for
Mhm.
me, paying the $20 is worth, like,
Yeah.
getting to the front, especially in Magic Kingdom when you're, like, all the way up. You know,
Yeah.
some of the other parks is not as critical, but
Mhm.
Magic Kingdom is was helpful.
Yeah, I believe
So
that.
discounted preferred parking prices when you're
Mhm.
staying on property. So you do have to factor those things in as you're budgeting out, like, does it make sense? Am I only staying off property? Now, somebody comes and says, "Hey, I have Marriott points, I can stay in my hotel completely free," or sometimes there's more larger villa options that are much more
Mhm.
economical than Disney, and you have, whatever, you have a blended family or you have multiple, lots of children, whatever you need to fit your travel party dynamic, that might make more sense. But I always tell people, and this is true for me, it doesn't mean it's true for everybody. I would rather stay in the cheapest value, all the back corner room of the All-Star Movies hotel, the furthest freaking room possible, than stay off property. Because for me, the Disney bubble
Mhm.
is the vacation, right? The escape
Mhm.
from all that is the reality is the most important part. And that's the part you cannot get. You cannot recreate when you stay off property.
Yeah. I was gonna say, there are some hotels that are walking distance to some aspects of Disney that are considered off property, and that is the Disney Springs resort area. And you do have walkways from, I believe it's Hilton and Wyndham. Is it Wyndham?
I think
Yeah.
so.
And so they are both literally, one is across the street and the other is kitty corner from Disney Springs. So they're not great hotels. They're fine. I haven't stayed at the Hilton, but I have stayed at the Wyndham. And yeah, they're fine. The beds aren't very comfortable.
No, they're
You
fine.
can see fireworks if you're in a high enough room, and like facing the correct direction, which is great. You can walk to Disney Springs, which for some people that is a selling point because there are only a handful of Disney resorts that can quickly and easily get you to Disney Springs, not via a bus. Um, so that's something to like keep in mind if you think you're going to spend time at Disney Springs or Typhoon Lagoon, because Typhoon Lagoon is also right there. So if you were going to like take a ride share and you're staying at in the Disney Springs area, it's going to be very quick for you. Um, but again, the caveat there is you're still not at a Disney resort. It's still going to be a pain to get to the parks unless you know the like 12 steps that you can take to get yourself on a Disney bus, but like that shit is complicated. And unless you are a pro and you've been to Disney a bunch, it's not it's not worth it.
No,
Yeah.
no. So now we'll pivot. I mean, I think it's
Yeah.
clear we both would rather stay on property,
At
in
Disney World,
World,
yeah.
at Disney World. So now we're going to
Yeah.
pivot though and talk a little bit about Disneyland, where that mentality does shift a little bit, um,
Yeah.
because there aren't as quite as many on-site
Mhm.
parks.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, Walt Disney World has a wide variety of room types, of room price points. That is not the case at Disneyland. So the three on property Disneyland hotels are all pretty similarly priced. Pixar Pier is going to be your least expensive. Grand California is going to be your most expensive. I would say the array in price difference typically is going to be about $1,000 for a night. So that sounds like a lot of money, but when you're already paying $600 for one night, is $1,000 more?
Well, and the Pixar Pier coming in most economical, it really rivals like high-end, moderate Disney
Hmm.
World pricing to low-end
Yeah,
deluxe pricing, right? So you're not
exactly.
getting that
Yeah,
value price point of, $200 a night at Pop Century. That's not
right.
an option for
Yeah,
on-site
it does not.
Disneyland. Yeah.
Yeah. So, if you've never been to Disneyland, it is all very small. The parks are across from each other. The hotels are all, I believe, the longest walk. I've like recorded a FaceTime live walking it. A FaceTime live, a Facebook live. FaceTime is live, Kayla. I've recorded a Facebook live walking from Pixar Place to the front turnstiles of Disneyland, and I believe it was roughly 15 minutes, and that was with a large crowd at Downtown Disney. So they are all easily walkable, which I would say is perk number one.
And
Um,
that, if I may interrupt, that 15 minutes doesn't
yeah,
feel like 15 minutes because you are
yeah,
walking through downtown Disney. So it
yeah.
feels like you're immediately immersed in the world, right?
Yeah, you don't feel like you've left Disney. I mean, because you haven't left Disney at all on that 15-minute walk. If you're staying at the Disneyland Hotel, I believe it's about a 10-minute walk. And if you're staying at Grand Californian, depending if you're going to California Adventure or Disneyland Park, California Adventure, you're literally right there. You're just going down into the lobby. If you're going to Disneyland Park, I would say 5 minutes max, depending on like how many people are around. So that's one big perk because when you look at the good neighbor hotels for Disneyland, a lot of them are like over a mile away, and that is not a walk that you want to make at the end of the night.
Right.
You've already walked 20,000 steps throughout the park. Your feet are on fire. You feel like you could actually die at any moment. The last thing you want to do is push a stroller another mile
Right. No.
in Anaheim. Like you're not in the Disney bubble walking that mile. You are outside, which we'll get to that. But I would say the biggest thing about staying on property at Disneyland, which there aren't nearly as many perks as there are at Walt Disney World, is that you're getting early entry. So that early entry is 30 minutes prior to park opening. It alternates throughout the week. So some days it'll be Disneyland, some days it'll be California Adventure. And everybody that's staying at a Disney property is getting in that half an hour early. That is it. There are no good neighbors included in that. There's nobody else. It is only if you are staying at one of the three properties that you are getting in early.
And that really matters because Lightning Lane operates differently there, and you
Yep.
can't start making Lightning Lanes until you're inside the park. So
Yep.
you have, if you take advantage of that, you will have that much more time to start making the
Mhm.
high priority Lightning Lanes, which
Yeah.
again is a big deal because as we know, people are often doing shorter stints. They might only be in the parks 2 days, three at the most, and so on their trip, on their visit, so they are trying to maximize getting those high priority things. It's not like they're there for a week, like they might be in Walt Disney World.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, I would say that the crowd size inside the parks in the morning is so much lower because when you think about Walt Disney World, yeah, you're split across four parks every day, getting in that half hour early, but you also have 10 times as many resorts as you do at Disneyland. So it's a very, very small group of people that are going to be in the parks with you early, which I think in and of itself pays for me, pays for staying on property. The other opportunity that you have at Disneyland is to be able to charge to your room, which is something that we didn't talk about Walt Disney World, but that is also something you can do at Walt Disney World. If you are staying at one of the hotels, you can set up your Magic Band or your room key, whatever you're using, to be able to have charging access, which is really great.
Mm,
Again, that ease of use if you want to be able to just
you know what? It was convenient before Apple Pay existed, but now
yes,
I'm just
exactly.
tapping my
Yeah.
watch anyway. So why the hell do I care?
Yeah.
The same credit
Yeah.
cards attached to both things.
If you trust your kids, it is nice to sort of be able to give them that freedom. Like, you've got teenagers. It's nice to be
Yeah,
able to go, okay, we will give them charging privileges and test it, I guess.
right. 'Cause by default, under 18 years old, the charging privileges are turned off.
Yeah.
But same, I just Apple Cash my kids, and then they just use the Apple Cash at Apple Pay. So it's just, I mean, which
Yeah.
I think, they think money doesn't really exist. So you just, they'll just gonna get money. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
It is definitely a perk that I think has sort of gone by the wayside, like you're saying, since Apple Pay has come around and like to pay in general has made things so much easier. But it is, I don't know, I think it's fun to just like have my Magic Band and not have to worry about anything else and then get a bill at the end and go, what did I spend my money
Yeah,
on?
that does happen. What?
But you can't use it for mobile ordering. Like you can use Apple Pay, but you can't
Right.
charge to your room for mobile ordering, which is kind of annoying.
So they're really, though, the only perks of staying on property, right? And to me, they're definitely valuable and huge,
Yeah.
especially in Disneyland. Having that early access to selecting the lightning lanes and getting in the park
Mhm.
where no one's in there. I mean, you
Mhm.
especially there, like I think I've in that half hour have cleared out all the attractions in Pixar Pier before the park even opened.
Yeah, and you're already in the back of the park.
Right,
So
right.
you've already beat the
Mhm.
crowd that's going to be coming.
Right, this wall
Yeah.
of people. You knew it, like, at 9 a.m., this wall of people were flying
You're
at.
getting your coffee from the
Yeah,
cappuccino cart while everyone
well,
else is, like, rushing to Incredicoaster.
um, but you talked also about, good neighbors that were over a mile away. That's not true of
Mhm.
all of them, right? And I think
Right.
it's almost the flip of Disney
Mhm.
World because we said, okay, there's dozens of Disney World properties that are owned by Disney. There's only 3 at Disneyland. There are almost 60 good neighbor hotels at Disneyland. 60,
And
right?
that's only good neighbors. That's not including the shitty, questionable, like,
Right.
motels.
Disneyland was like, "You don't meet our character,
Yeah.
our qualifications to be called a good neighbor." So, there are almost 60 hotels, right? And some of them are a mile or 2 away, and some
Mhm.
are quite literally you
Across
could
the street.
throw a stone and hit the
Mhm.
ticket boxes
Yeah.
outside of the park. So, uh,
Mhm.
talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so there are some hotels, some good neighbor hotels that are actually closer than I wouldn't necessarily say Grand Californian, but closer than a Disneyland hotel. So you've got a couple Best Westerns and things that are literally you walk out the Esplanade and they are the very first thing that you see. So I have a lot of people that I know that love to stay in those properties, not because they're a great place to stay. Like you're gonna have a more comfortable stay at a Disney owned property, but these people are here to put their head on a pillow for a couple of hours, wake up, get their free breakfast, go back to the park. Like that is what they care about. That being said, Disney's bubble ends as soon as you walk out of that Esplanade. And I think that that is something that a lot of people take for granted because Anaheim is not, I wouldn't say it's not the safest place, but like there are questionable things happening on Harbor and Catella. Those are the main streets that intersect at Disneyland. And you don't necessarily want to be out there. You have a pretty large unhoused population. Um, and you have like the like religious guy with his microphone screaming about how you're going to hell standing literally feet off of Disneyland property, which again, for me, I'm not faced by that and I'm like, yeah, whatever, fuck off, dude. But like if you have small children, that can be a pretty scary thing to encounter very first thing in the morning as you're walking on property.
Well, yeah,
But there's also like McDonald's and Panera and IHOP and like
and
all sorts and what?
a Walgreens, like,
Oh,
you
yeah,
see real
yeah,
life
and
within
CVS. Yeah,
you take 5 steps out of that gate there, and real life is right there, right?
yeah.
Right.
But it's yeah, it's more expensive real life because they've increased the prices on everything. I mean, I don't think McDonald's has a dollar menu anymore anyways, but when they did have a dollar menu, it was not a dollar menu at that McDonald's.
Right.
Um, so, you know, there's some trade-off. If you want to save some money, the good neighbor hotels at Disneyland, I think are perfectly valid. I personally stay at them pretty regularly. Um, but at the same time, I recognize how great staying at a Disney owned property is as well.
And I think to kind of wrap up, we keep talking about these good neighbors and why are they good neighbors? You mentioned earlier Disney puts them through some, they have to meet certain qualifications to be
Hmm.
considered this, but the advantage is you can actually book them through Disney and package your tickets together with them.
Yep.
Like we said, you cannot add a dining plan. There is no dining plan in Disneyland anyway, but
Yep.
what you can do there, what is the hugest advantage to that? If you buy your tickets separate, if you book that Best Western by itself and then go buy your Disneyland tickets by themselves, you have to pay in full for your Disneyland tickets and they're non-refundable.
Hmm.
Otherwise, if you package it together and book it through Disneyland, you just put the $200 deposit down and get the room, right? Now,
Yep.
one caveat to that would be that not all of the room categories in all of those hotels are bookable through Disneyland, or you may
Mm-hmm.
see the Best Western has availability, but the block that Disneyland has is showing unavailability. So there are some caveats there. That's why you probably need to talk to a travel advisor
Mm-hmm.
to get, to know all those little strange caveats and best ways to get there. But, um, so I think really the summary here is staying on property saves you money, and only you can decide what price convenience has
Mm-hmm.
for you, right? And that's sort of what I always tell people. I'm like, it can be as convenient as you want, as if you're willing to pay, right? And so you start deciding, oh, I want to be close, I want to just be on property, I want to have a dining plan, I want to have this, I want to be able to walk,
Mm-hmm.
I want to, right? Okay, well, that the walking has this price point attached to it essentially.
Yeah.
So you decide, but we're not, I don't think you can really go wrong, but you just have to be well aware of what you're buying.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly it. It's a matter of like making sure that you understand the whole picture. That's why it's important to work with a professional that knows what the fuck they're doing,
Yeah,
like Chris or myself.
like Chris.
Shameless plug. Wow. Okay,
I'm just kidding.
sir.
I'm just kidding. You're okay. The yes. So
Uh huh. Yeah,
let us.
backtrack. Go ahead. Take your foot out of your mouth, Chris.
I think I
I'll
will.
wait.
I think I will. I don't regret anything. So we're curious though. Let us know, where do you stay? Do you look on property first, see if there's specials going on, promotions, and then see if it fits within your budget, or do you go right to the good neighbor offsite hotels? What do you do? Why do you do it? We want to know.
Yeah. What's your favorite? Like, do you have, Chris and I have our favorite places to stay. We'd love to hear where you're staying. Yeah. What your thought process looks like when you're making a decision on a place to stay. And until next time, let's just go.
Let's do it.